Hello and welcome to the Pied Wagtail podcast. Today I have Halina with me. Hey, Halina.
Hello, nice to see you today.
Yeah, and you. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, I live in Holt in North Norfolk, and I've been here for about 20 years. And I'm a teacher. I really enjoy teaching, spending time with children. I work in the area of mainly special needs and English as a second language. And over the last few years, I've got more interested in well-being and well-being modalities, and trained as an EFT practitioner during lockdown, which has changed my life. And I'll be really happy to talk a bit more about EFT later on in our conversation, but it's made me a much happier and more balanced person on the whole.
Cool. We will get to EFT. I'm going to kick off with my first question, which is I usually like to ask people what their own definition of wellness and resilience is, because I get a range of answers and it's always fascinating. So what would be your definition?
And the word that comes to mind most of all is harmony. And ever since, I've always been musical, and since my teenage years I've been a singer, and singing is a big part of my life now. And when I was trying to name my business, I was thinking of which words meant things to me. And harmony is a word that means a lot more than just singing in tune. It's all to do with balance, it's to do with connection, it's to do with being in harmony, not just with each other, but with the wider universe, with God, with harmony is really special for me. And if I can hold that to myself, if I can recreate what I get through my singing in my everyday life, that's a great win. So I'm striving for that sense of harmony. I suppose it's a bit like flow, isn't it? It's when I'm singing, I forget everything else. I'm just one with the music, with the people I'm singing with the audience. And I wish life could be like that every day, but I get glimpses of it. And I also get glimpses of it when I'm doing the therapeutic work, or I'm reading, or I'm writing. So yeah, the search for harmony, I would say, is my well-being word.
I like that. That's not an answer I've had before, so I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a nice word, and I like how you described it. So you have said that well-being is important to you over the last few years, and obviously that includes harmony. So could you tell us a little bit more about your own personal journey towards wellness?
Ooh, it's like, how much time do you have? I think I've always read. I've always had books that have pointed me in the direction of well-being. I think one of the first books I ever read when I was a teenager was probably Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And suddenly there's this whole world of, wow, you can read books and feel better afterwards. There are techniques to use, there's ideas. And I think as life got more complicated, I was always reaching for books and authors that would help. And things got particularly hard when my older daughter was in her teenage years, and mental health issues raised their ugly head, I guess. And that's when I had to go back to these well-being books. I had to go back to new books. I had to dig deep in my personal faith as well. And the assumptions that everyone would be fine and these problems wouldn't hit me crashed and burned. That was like, oh my God, I've got to dig deep here, and it's on my shoulders. I need to find a way out of this, which is not just asking someone else for help. I used EFT tapping in a counselling session, and that was like a light going on, because it was, oh wow, this actually works. The talking bit didn't particularly. It was nice to be heard. But when we used the acupressure points and tapped through one of the particular issues. It was like a great unlocking of emotions that I generally and probably still do keep fairly repressed. So I thought, okay, there are techniques. It's not just books. There are things that I can do, and that really helped. And then the education into it helped. I've always learned stuff. I've always done Open University courses. A lifelong learner, and that is really exciting. It's helping my wellbeing journey as well. So learning about EFT and learning about other wellbeing techniques such as mindfulness and visualization and affirmations, all those helped me out of that quite desperate hole, I would say, as a parent, and has continued to help me and also given me a big heart for other people who are going through similar things.
I'm always in awe of that shift. Actually, I'm always in awe of people that pick up those self-help books like in the teenage years and quite early on, because I don't think I got to that kind of stuff till much later in life. So I always think, oh wow, like it's amazing that people are reading that stuff so young. I don't know, what was it that made you think, okay, I've got to shift from these books now, these books are really helpful and I've read a lot and I know a lot, but what was kind of the thing that made you think, oh yeah, no, books aren't going to fix this, I need to go deeper? Like, what was the transition period with that?
Just not coping. Just opening a book and the words weren't enough, and knowing that you've got to target the body as well. The whole mind body element of it, I was working on the mind stuff, but when you're in a panic and you don't know what to do, you don't know how to dig deep enough to cope with the situation, how to create harmony, I needed something which was both body and mind. And I think EFT was certainly one of the things that helped me dig deeper in that way.
I think it's really interesting you said that, though, because I think that's so right. I think that there is a point where the mind isn't enough, and actually to go deeper and to actually do some kind of healing, you have to move it into the body. And I think that is what going deeper means, really, in terms of healing and getting to know yourself. But that's quite hard, I think. Moving into the body is quite a difficult thing to do.
I think it's definitely hard when there's trauma, because as like Peter Levine's work in Waking the Tiger, he says how we have echoes of trauma that are trapped in our bodies, and we don't necessarily know with the mind that they're there, but we feel something when we're triggered, whether it's this gut feeling or a tightness in your neck or headaches or even like physical issues like back pain or something like that. And we often say, oh, it's just a headache, oh, it's just back pain, it's because I went swimming or I lifted weights that were too strong. But in fact, these things could well be the echoes of these traumas, and we don't want to unlock that. Bloody scary unlocking trauma. And I had stuff that went on in my teenage years, and when my daughter had stuff, I was thinking, oh, hello, there's that stuff that I haven't worked on, and I successfully put it away in the trauma box, or so I thought, but it wasn't worked on. I just assumed that I'd be okay. So part of the work over the last few years has been going back to the things that have wounded me, and have stay around, have been unprocessed. And I'm happy to say that step by step these things are being processed, and it's helping me be a better parent as well as a better person and a better practitioner too.
It's interesting, isn't it, that things don't ever go away, and like we put them in boxes, but I don't think unless we process something, it never does go away.
I think we can distance ourselves from it, and we can put it into a a safer, more protected box. That's one of the techniques we use in EFT. And that certainly helps. But whether we're fully released from it, I think we can be released from the triggers. And we released from the phobias or released from the fears that are affecting our everyday life through the work that you go through. But yeah, you've got to hold the faith and keep going with it.
Okay, so we're going to get to EFT, but what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the other things that you were saying. So you've mentioned kind of counselling, you've mentioned affirmations, you've mentioned visualisation, and your faith, all as kind of strategies and tips that have helped you through it. Are any of those kind of more prominent in your healing and your journey?
Oh, I definitely mentioned my faith. I was brought up as a Christian, but I came to a point in my early 20s when I was looking for a wider vision of faith, let's say a multi-faith or interdenominational vision of faith. And I found a practice called the Latihan, which is an organization called Subud. And this spiritual practice is one that you can do if you have any faith. And it's a sort of connection with God. You sit or stand in a state of receiving, and it's a beautiful exercise that connects you with your body. So we're back to the body connection here. It connects you with God, and it connects you with each other. But it's a regular practice that you do, and it's something I've done for over 20 years now, and that has given me an awareness of myself, of when people have a sense of yes and no in their body. But you self-write about that quite a lot. You have a situation and you say, is it the right thing for me to do this? And your body
intuition. Like intuition, is that what you mean?
It is like an intuition, but it's very definitely a yes or definitely a no. And lots of people say, yeah, connect with your yes and connect with your no. But it's a bit like that. So I've been able to be in that state of receiving in my life and know what the next step is, know what the next feeling is in a situation, know what, dare I say, God wants for me in this situation. And that has been enormously helpful throughout my whole life, doing this practice and then being in the state of, let's say, open receiving when I need it.
So how does that work then? Like, how does that, I'm really interested in this. The state of receiving, do you go in with a mindset? Do you go in with the question? What's the process? Or do you just go in a state of presence?
The practice, Latihan practice, that's just an Indonesian word for exercise. And during the practice, you just stand, you're there for half an hour and you just do what comes. There's a bit of singing, a bit of movement, a bit of prayer, just whatever comes. You allow for what happens. And it usually feels really good. And it doesn't feel strange, and it's not like you're controlled by anything else. You know that it comes from inside you. It's almost like going to church. It just has a sense of praise to it. The receiving thing, you stand there in the same state as the Latihan and you ask that question. Usually as, how would it be if I took this decision? And something happens. It might be just turn away. It might be this is brilliant and you feel wonderfully released or joyful or something, and it gives you the conviction that this is right or this is not right. Sometimes what you receive is ambiguous, and I always use my mind, and the answers are ones that I know deep down already. It's like accessing my deep thoughts or my higher self. That's probably what it is. It's just one way of explaining it. So yeah, I can ask a specific question and get a specific answer. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it isn't, but I still use my mind and my past experience and my logic and all the other things to make decisions about my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enormously useful over the years. And sometimes I get the answers that my brain doesn't want to hear.
Mm.
Like, for example, be patient. And I don't want to be patient, or everything will be fine. I don't think everything's going to be fine. It goes against my sort of ego-ridden brain that wants everything now, or just sees disaster, but said no, all will be well.
Have you ever had a situation? Have you ever had a situation where you've gone against what it's told you? So say it's told you to be, your inner self, your higher self has told you to be patient, or they told you something and then you've gone against it and then it's like you've regretted
Yeah,
it.
sure, all the time. But that's when you feel the disharmony.
Mm.
Because once you've asked the question, you know the answer inside. So you know it doesn't feel right.
Mm.
And so it doesn't feel good, even if you do. As we all know, we all have inner instincts. We all go against what we feel is right and feel bad about it. Well, most people do anyway. But I don't think of it as sin or being bad, thing like that. It's just, it's just the way it is. It's, you learn. It's all journey, really.
So is that a practice that you do with a group of other people, or do you do that on your own?
Both. There's groups all around the world that meet together and do it. It's an international organisation, and it's lovely to do it in a group with other people, but you can just as well do it on your own. So.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that, because that's something new to me, which I find really interesting. I think there's
not talked about very much. It's I think there's quite a lot of suspicion towards the organisation,
right.
Probably because it's interdenominational and people don't quite know what it is or think it might be a cult of some sort. But it's very non-judgmental, and you can dip in and out as much as you like, and it's all about discovering yourself and being on your own journey towards, being at one with God, being open.
Okay. So that's one thing. But what about, I wonder if you could tell me anything about affirmations or visualization and how that has helped you on your well-being journey.
I think I find visualization is a very useful tool, combined with tapping as well. I've used it on its own, for example, in the Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod's things, and visualization being one of these savers that you do in the morning. I started doing that in lockdown quite a lot. So I put on one piece of music. It was the same piece of music each time, and just allowed my brain to visualize things that I wanted in my life. And the music worked to sort of help me get into that mindset as well. And so I've used it in that way, and it makes you feel more upbeat. It makes you think about your goals in a very positive way. But the way I often use it in EFT sessions is that people maybe visualize their pain as an object, or that they visualize them a place to put their unresolved issues. We're talking about containers. For example, in an EFT session a few days ago, I visualized putting my unresolved issues on a beautiful boat with beautiful coloured sails, and that's sailing out to sea with an angel on the prow of the boat. And these ways, your brain still understands it. I get it, that visualizing something with your brain, it still does something in your brain. And that's incredible. That boat sailed away. Those issues for me were put to bed for the moment in a really positive and safe way.
Okay.
When I work with clients, they all they come up with their own visualizations, but I might just ask the question, what do you see? Or what could that look like? And it's incredible how creative and imaginative some people are with visualizations, and how crazy the session sounds at that point. But it's incredibly useful. So as a sort of therapeutic tool, as well as going towards my goals sort of tool as well, I use visualization.
Okay, so we'll talk about your business soon, but can you say tell us what EFT is and how it's helped you on a personal level before we get into later how it can help other people?
So the sort of science and mechanics of it, you want me to talk about first?
Sort of explain what it is, maybe the acronym, sort of talk about.
Okay, so EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And that doesn't really say what it is at all. It sounds like anything, it doesn't pretend. But the way it's often called is tapping, and that is the thing that you actually do. So you use your fingertips to tap on 9 acupressure points, starting on the side of your hand. And you've got the eyebrows, underneath the eyes, nose, chin, collarbones, under the arm, top of the head. And there are plenty of other points as well that are used in acupuncture, because they're all part of the meridian system. It turns out that simply tapping with your fingers sends this tiny electrical signal that works to calm your immune system, not your immune system, your nervous system down. So it directly affects the level of cortisol in your body. Now, there's some amazing scientific studies. There's over, I think, 65 randomized control studies now, and hundreds of others. But there's one I'd just like to mention. So they had 3 different groups. There was a tapping group, 1 hour tapping. There was a group who learnt about stress and talked about ways of coping with stress. And there was a group who read magazines. And they all did this trial. And then the cortisol was measured before and after. So the group that read the magazines for an hour, their stress levels went up by 2%. The people who learnt about stress and stress techniques, their cortisol levels dropped by 19%. Now, on Instagram at the moment, there's something about watching beavers eat cabbage or something, and how your stress levels can go down by 17% watching beavers eat cabbage. So only 2% more effective than that. Anyway, the tapping group, their cortisol levels after 1 hour of tapping in a group went down by 43%. It's enormous. Incredible. It is incredible. No drugs, not even one-to-one work. It was in a group. So it is a stress reduction tool. And they've also tested, is it the talking that does it? Is it the words you say? Is it the tap on any part of your body? Or is it actually tapping the points in your body? And they did find out that it is actually tapping the specific points in your body that makes the difference. So it's been very well tested, and physically, it is a physical intervention that works on the somatic level at the same time as using psychology. So the psychology side of it, we start with tapping on the side of the hand. And the first statement, it's always one to do with self-acceptance, which is a Rogerian theory. You start with self-acceptance, unconditional positive regard for the person, and that's the basis that you work on. So you tap on the side of the hand and you talk about the issue that you've got. Even though I feel anxious, then the other side of it could be, I deeply love and accept myself. Many clients can't say that, particularly when they first start. It might be, I'm open to accepting myself, or I accept my feelings, or you use the language which is comfortable for your client. Then you tap on the points and you accept how you feel. I feel anxious. I can't stand it anymore. I don't know what to do. But these will be the words that your client has already expressed themselves to you with. So you're working on this level of accepting emotions while calming this system down going straight to the amygdala, which is the fight or flight response, and working to just to de-trigger, to sort of put water on the flames of whatever bad situation that you're tapping about, whatever stressful thought that you're tapping about. So it had this dichotomy of you're thinking your stressful thought. You might be thinking about a particular incident. We usually work with specific incidents. But at the same time, you're sending these calming signals physically to your brain saying, it's okay. It's safe to talk about this. It's safe to let these triggers go. It's safe to express exactly how you feel. And it's incredible how quickly it works to kind of diffuse the stress, and people quickly feel distance from the, so they might come with, for example, this particular scene, and you work through the scene. It's called the movie technique, and they say, oh, this person said this, and it was so, and then they're feeling it inside their body, and those words, and you tap on the words, and that person said this, these words, and then I can't really hear those words anymore. I'm not really getting that in my brain. The imagination somehow distances itself, or the look on somebody's face, which seems so clear to start with, suddenly goes a bit fuzzy in your imagination, or doesn't seem so important, and you just step away slowly as you tap through the issues. Does that sort of answer some questions about the technicalities?
That's a follow-up question, if
Go
that's
on.
okay. So I had did a couple of sessions of tapping. It was quite a few years ago now, about being scared to get on an aeroplane,
Yeah.
and the flying fear. And it was quite interesting, and I find tapping helpful. So if as I've got two questions actually while I'm thinking this through. If people generally know I'm nervous if I tap my hands, because I would do that side tap. Generally if I'm nervous, and then people know that I'm nervous because I'm doing that. So I've got two questions based on that. So the first one is, does the tapping have to be done in order? Because I find that sometimes it's literally just that one that helps. And the second question is it then just a diffusion distraction technique that deals with something in the moment, or actually does it have long-term benefits of that deeper work and actually releasing stuff?
Yeah. It can be both, and there are amazing long-term benefits, and these have been studied. So a lot of these interventions have follow-up after a year, after 2 years, and it's been proven that there are long-term benefits to it. One study was done based on survivors of the Rwanda genocide, and children who had suffered terrible things had been given 1 or 2 sessions of tapping, and incredibly, 12 months later, 2 years later, looking at the size of the sample size that they had, the children weren't suffering from PTSD. Mm-hmm. So even in small interventions, it can have a long-term difference. And in my work, we quite often go to deeper work. So you start off with something that's happened recently that's triggered you in your life, and then the next step is to go to the corresponding moment that has caused that trigger, which might be a childhood issue, which might be a teenage issue, and working on that can make real difference in your life. But working on this happened yesterday and I'm a bit scared of driving or something, that may only have a short-term issue. But if you go to the point where you, for example, had an accident in the car, or the root of your fear of driving, that is what will make the difference in your life. And that I did quite a lot of work about fear of driving, and that's one of my we'd say success stories, that I went back to quite a number of incidents which had contributed to my lack of confidence in driving and limited belief that I could drive anywhere of any significance, like more than 2 or 3 hours. And now I'm driving 6-hour journeys and feeling fine about it. I'm feeling competent. But that, it was all in my mind, and related to particular incidents that I'd had with near misses and so on in the past. Your second question about which points to use, I think people have favourite points, and if I'm using a secret point, for example, I don't really want people to go around like that going, yes, I'm very nervous and I want everyone to see that. I might use a collarbone point. I might massage this, what we call the soft spot here, which already I can feel is relaxing me. I might use finger points as well, which just looks like you're playing with your fingers or something. Or I might tap on the side of the hand underneath the table or the desk that I'm on, and that calms me down. Doesn't matter what order you do them in. Main things that you're kind of covering the bases by just doing, you can do it with one hand, you can do it with two hands, but the main thing is that you're hitting the point more or less repeatedly. That's where you tap a few times on the same point, because you might just miss the point. You can get these little devices that actually find the exact point, because your skin has a kind of lower conductivity in those particular points. So people who do acupuncture might use these devices to get the exact point where the needle would go in. But if you're kind of spreading 3 fingers and tapping more or less on the point, you're going to hit it. Maybe not in time, but more or less.
I just wondered, because it's really interesting, EFT. I wondered if you could take me back to the first time you used it, and how did you know in that counselling session that that was a thing? Like, how did you feel afterwards?
I cried.
Okay.
It was response. It was the counsellor said to me, "Oh, this might look a bit weird, but just go with me." And I think she said some sort of words, and I just tapped those. I repeated the words there, and I thought, well, yeah, was something supposed to happen there? And then she's changed the words slightly. And then as I tapped, it was this whole, as you know me, I'm quite a guarded person. I'm not one to sort of be vulnerable without feeling a kind of sense of control in that. But the moment I tapped and said these particular words, it was like, oh yeah, that is the root of it. And it was such a relief to be able to express that, and I guess feeling the release of the actual tapping, the mechanical work that I did on the points of them. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand it, but I really felt it was something that was unlocking me in a way that just talking hadn't been. So yeah, crying. And people cry a lot during sessions, because it's the relief of intellectual relief of being able to admit what they need to admit, or be vulnerable, or say the truth, but then somehow this release, physical release, lets things go as well. And people might not just cry, they might shout or laugh, or in fact, sessions are often really funny, because people are not used to saying what they really feel and what they think. So yeah, sometimes we're screaming with laughter in some sessions when we're releasing stuff. So yeah, but the crying was the thing that showed me that, oh yeah, there's something in this here. And that wasn't the first or the last time that I cried in a session.
Did you then like your next counselling session, did you then say, oh, actually, no, this is work, should this be our main kind of mode of working together now?
I'm not sure I was that confident.
Okay.
I think, and I didn't have that sense of I'm going to direct her how to help me.
Right.
I didn't have many sessions and I couldn't afford them. But the thing I went out and bought the tapping solution book. So I thought I need to learn about this, and I looked up courses, because I knew that it was something that I needed to know more about and to understand it intellectually. And I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to have a career in it, but I thought this is a route that I need to find more out about. So, as I've done in other times in my life, education, let's educate myself more about it.
Yeah, so
I'm all for self-empowerment. I think I don't want to sit and wait for someone to do something to me. Be able to do things for myself, and teach people to do things for themselves as well.
So you were saying that, you know, when you first go to a session, and a lot of people aren't used to this self-acceptance, self-compassion, showing love towards themselves, and it's really difficult for them. How do you help somebody to get over that initial awkwardness or feeling like that's not something that they're used to, and how do they get over that to do EFT?
Well, they've already got over it to a certain extent because they're already there. They're already in the room. They've already committed to being with you. So it's not necessarily the first step. The first step might actually be the intake conversation, when they're really not sure whether you're worth spending money on or what it's all about. So I'm just very gentle with people and listen to where they're coming from. And I just use my listening skills and reflect back on, so this is difficult for you. I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that. And then I write down some notes and then lead them in what we call a round of tapping. And so I use their language, reflecting back what they do, and then usually turn to the positive, or we do this container thing of, even though I've got all these problems, I'm going to store them in this place now until I'm able to deal with them. And so people get a sort of experience of one round of tapping within the sort of half hour that we've had our initial conversation. And by the end of it, they think, nearly always, they think, actually, that was really good. I'm feeling so much better than I did at the beginning of this conversation. And then they make their decision after that whether they want to work with me or not. So it's, using my listening skills, being really gentle, letting people take things at their pace, and not forcing the positive as well. It's a mistake generally that's the thing about affirmations, I suppose. You can say all is well as many times as you want, but if in the back of your mind you know that things aren't well and there's all these things that need to be done before you feel all is well, you're not going to believe it. So it's allowing people to start, even if they're in a particularly negative place, and maybe the best you can do is store things or just have a bit of self-acceptance to that, rather than forcing them into shoehorning them into being positive about the situation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, what you've just said there about the affirmation, because if you say in EFT, you are basically saying an affirmation, aren't you? Even though this, I love and accept myself, which is kind of like an affirmation. So based on that theory of, actually, if you don't believe it, it's not going to work. How did you get
You just
use
the language which is acceptable for the client.
So
you negotiate that.
Be that sentence. It would be you
use the even though, and then you get to the point of you say, how does that feel for you to say that you don't accept yourself? And they say, oh no, I can't say that. Okay. Is it all right for you to say blah blah blah, or is it? But it's even better if you pick up on something that they've told you already. Like, I know it's going to work out for me, for example. Okay. And so you use their own so negotiation and checking in with the client. Does that feel true for you? Does that feel right to you? Can we have a bit more self-acceptance now or less? Just being in tune with the person. And you watch their body language, you watch their expressions, you know, you can generally tell where people are on that level, how nervous they are, how frightened they are, and how difficult it is for them to be in that situation. And you just sort of tune in and act accordingly. But again, it's a gentle, intuitive response of which words to use at the time.
Okay. So as you said, it's a stress reduction technique, or therapeutic technique. So what else does EFT do for you? What else would you say were the main benefits of EFT for somebody?
Other than reducing stress?
Yeah.
Well, you could argue that stress is at the basis of all illness. Stress is at the basis of most of the things that we suffer, or the stress is at the basis of arguing with reality. And so I think it can be used on practically anything. There's been studies using it for things like memory, helping memory, or using your imagination, or improving your eyesight. And so I think we are encouraged to use it, to try it for things. Mm-hmm. In my experience, using it for regulating your life, for learning how to respond rather than react. So you have, instead of being in our own stories of he said that, I do that, and reacting from our stories, from our stress response, from what we've learned in our lives, being able to do a round of tapping in between our stressful situation and our response to it is a way of regulating your everyday life. And that's an incredible gift. As I've mentioned before, working on things that you carry from your childhood is one of the most important things. And even when that's all well and done, we still, things happen to us. We lose people. We experience grief. We have exams coming up. We have things that will give us stresses in life, and tapping can be used on this. Recently wanted to specialise more in grief and bereavement issues, and for many years I've been interested in talking to people and listening to people when they're at that stage of their lives, and reading about grief and bereavement. I did Open University course, Death and Dying. I've read books about things like near-death experiences and so on, and it feels like an area that I'm drawn to. I'm happy to talk to people about mortality, about death, about losing people, about grief, and I can see that there's such a need for that in people's lives. And it's also a time, and if people don't get the help they need around a bereavement or around sort of mortality issues, it can be a real trigger for downward spiral of mental health. And one of the reasons is we don't talk about it enough in our society. It's still a taboo. People might squeeze out, "Oh, I'm so sorry about your loss," but what about the follow-up? What about the support of that person day in, day out after the bereavement? So I want to be available to help people in that time as well. And we're all going to experience grief and loss. And it might not be from a death, it might be from a loss of a relationship, it might be from loss of a baby, or a loss of opportunities, a loss of a job. And so I think that's an area where I'd like to be able to help people with EFT, and I know it can be a really useful tool.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're coming up to the end, but I wondered if I have a last question, which will be after this bit, but I wondered if you could give your top strategies for well-being resilience from a personal perspective and then your professional perspective.
Okay. Top strategies. Keep learning. so many useful books and useful strategies out there, and I'll never stop. I'll never say, oh, EFT is my one go-to thing, because there's so much happening all the time, so many things being published. So keep learning. I would say, I haven't mentioned writing as a well-being strategy. Being creative. I'm creative with my singing, but I would say writing poetry, in fact, is something that I've done at quite dark moments in my life, and using metaphor and simile and getting one step away from strong feelings by writing about them has been incredibly useful at really key points in my life. And didn't really matter how bad or good I thought the poems were, but the fact that they were written down, and I found symbols and metaphors that were satisfying to me. So yeah, writing, education, continue to read, finding allies. I don't have many friends, but the friends I have are very special, and friends I can talk to. I always seem to have found allies in certain stages in my life, and I'm grateful to be other people's allies as well. But meaningful, I would say nearly always female friendships have been really important to me. Meaningful work, the work I do with children at school, I think they bring me down to earth more than anything else. And I know that the basis of my work with them is love, and I'm able to express that by teaching spelling and writing and reading and coaching them as young people, and that's incredibly lovely work that I do. So what have I mentioned? Writing, reading, meaningful work, friends, singing, getting out in nature, and having a lovely dog who helps me get out in nature, and also just unlock some even more love into my life, having a lovely greyhound. You know,
yeah, I'm so besotted with mine. Yeah.
Yes, lovely.
Okay, so there's your personal things. What were the top strategies for EFT then, as a practitioner, as EFT practitioner? I don't even know if that's a question that makes sense, or is it just do EFT?
I would say experiment with EFT. There's apps like Tapping Solution app. There's plenty of things on YouTube. There's tap along things, and you can test for yourself how it reduces stress. So experiment with it. Read the books about it. Tap along with people online. Use the app. But I would say if you want to do deeper work, reach out to a practitioner, because you need someone at your side if you're going to go to difficult things and childhood traumas and so on. But have the courage, because there's so much hope that you don't have to carry these burdens for the rest of your life. And my small experience of helping people, for example, out of their PTSD, which they'd held for 20, 30 years, and that had been affecting them on a daily basis, to witness that being released was incredible. And it just gave me so much joy and hope that I could do more of this work, and that people didn't have to carry these burdens. So have a go at it, see if it works for you, read about it, but get some help if you want to do some harder stuff.
So how can people find out more about you? Where do they go to?
Well, I have a website, my business called Tapping for Harmony, and it's tappingforharmony.com. And I also post on Instagram, also Tapping for Harmony, all one word. And I'm really happy just to talk to people about it. I don't charge for an initial consultation. And I know how hard it is to find the right person that fits you, and there's so many people out there who offer therapeutic services of all sorts, and I find that choice really difficult. And I understand that other people find that, so I'm quite happy to chat to people with no commitment conversations, and if it's not for them, that's fine.
So based on that, because it is hard to find somebody that you have a rapport with, what should people be looking for in an EFT practitioner in that initial consultation?
I guess that you can tune in with them, that you have a personal connection with them, that somebody you can relax with, you feel that kind of non-judgmental response from. I think somebody who's kind of modest as well, and is not pushing anything. It's just like, here I am, come and work with me if you like, but it's all about your choice. I also think sense of humour is really important. If you can laugh with someone, and it kind of leads for a more genuine relationship. And we all need a good laugh from time to time. It's amazing how much fun you can have when you start admitting how you really feel in certain situations.
Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you. We're on the last question now. And the last question is always, can you tell everybody what a main strength or value or personality trait that you have that is strong, that you use in a positive way towards your own well-being?
That's not just strength. I think the first one that comes to mind is kindness. And I guess I value that in myself, and I'm looking for ways to be kind in helping others and connecting with others. I'm looking for ways to be kinder towards myself as well. I'm aware that my inner critic can get in the way sometimes, but I would say that's my number one quality that I'm projecting towards others and in my work.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
All right. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Brianne.